What is going on, everybody? It is Dylan with DFS, bringing you the Week 15 cash and tournament plays. So, normally would go by position, but I feel like it's easier for people to go game by game, so that's what we'll do. We'll start off with Washington and New Orleans. Now, quarterback, I think Jaden Daniels is a good tournament play. If you want to go there in cash, I'm okay with it. Just a really good matchup for Washington. Obviously, Noah Brown out for Washington, but Brian Robinson, Jaden Daniels, some really good matchups there. Not really interested in Jay Kaner. The Saints offense is just really hurt. Kamara, I think for the prices and plays we have at running back, Kamara doesn't need to be a cash play, but because of the volume he continues to get every week, he's a good tournament play. With the amount of injuries, a backup quarterback now, we could see a couple extra targets to Kamara. His price is under 8K. But Brian Robinson is a cash play for me at 6,200 with how bad the Saints have been against the run, how banged up they are. Austin Eckler out. Obviously he's been out. But Brian Robinson in a really good spot, really good price point, so I like that. And then wide receiver, I do have Terry McLaurin as a cash play for me at 7,200. That is because Noah Brown is out. That is the possibility that Washington somehow struggles to run the ball. I think it's a really good matchup. The Saints secondary has been very depleted just as much as their wide receivers and offense has. Their secondary is very injured. So Terry McLaurin at 7,200 is a good cash play for me. I'm not really interested in the tight ends, but I will say the Commanders defense is worth targeting in cash. So that's it for Washington, New Orleans, Dallas, and Carolina. So I like both quarterbacks for tournament plays. Obviously, the ceiling's not the highest for them. So if you're looking for a value at quarterback, there's couple other pieces, but I don't think either one is bad, right? We've seen Bryce Young in this Carolina offense. We just look the points they've put up recently against some good teams, right? Kansas City, Tampa, and Philly. I mean, they've been in all of those games. Bryce Young, 34, 46, and 35 pass attempts. So definitely getting the ball out there. Jalen Coker looks to be back this week for Carolina, so that's another plus for Bryce Young. On the other side, Carolina's defense has just been bad, but I do think Dallas is going to run the ball, which is why both running backs are huge cash plays for me. Both teams' defenses are very bad against the run. Both offenses, especially in a game like this where it's almost a meaningless game in the grand scheme of standings and stuff like that, right? Neither team is going to make the playoffs. The teams are still going to play hard. Obviously, these guys want to get paid. They want to boost their stats, all that stuff. So it's not saying the game is just a throwaway game, but I do think the running backs are going to be very, very heavily used in this one. So I like both Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard in cash. You could double stack. You could go Hubbard and Dowdle as your running back plays this week, and I don't have a problem with it. Typically, you don't want to do that in cash, but this is a week where I can see it. Wide receivers, the only one I'm looking at in tournaments is Adam Thielen at 5,400, just because we've kind of seen him and Bryce Young the last 2 weeks have a really good connection. 21 targets, basically 201 yards, but almost 100 yards a game for Adam Thielen in both those. So kind of the only one I'm targeting there. For tight ends, Jake Ferguson is a cash play for me at 3,800. Last week, only 6 targets, and that's against a Cincy defense who was bad against tight ends. Goes down $100 and now gets another really good matchup against a defense bad against tight ends. In this one, if you want to take the shot at either defense, I don't have a problem with that at all. Now, the Chiefs Browns, the quarterback, I don't think either quarterback is really a target for me in either cash or tournaments. Running back, kind of the same thing, right? Both these defenses. But then we get to the wide receivers, and I think Jerry Jeudy is a good tournament play. I would rather go to Elijah Moore as a cash play. Just because of the matchup he's going to have against Kansas City just favors him a little bit more. Obviously, last week was a down week compared to some of the weeks we've seen with Winston, and you've seen the numbers with Jerry Jeudy, and they've been far more impressive and more consistent. But that price point is getting up there. Tougher matchup on who he's going to face on the Kansas City secondary, so I like Elijah Moore, but We already know Tillman's out. There's a good shot David Njoku plays. You're going to have to watch that one. If Njoku's in a really good spot and only a few extra hundred more than Elijah Moore. I do think DeAndre Hopkins is in a good spot for tournaments. I don't think you need to go there in cash. It's not the greatest thing, but you clearly see both defenses play the running backs very well, especially in fantasy. They play them very well, and there's been holes in both the secondaries for these teams. So, Jerry Jeudy, yes, I think he's good in tournaments. Hopkins, yes, tournament. Elijah Moore, kind of the cash for me. And then tight ends, Kelsey. I don't have Kelsey as a cash. I'd rather go for someone like Trey McBride. But I think this week at tight end, we'll talk about some of those names here very soon. But there's some really good punt options, which, I mean, they're not even punt, but for the price point, they're punts. That you don't need to go someone like Travis Kelsey. Njoku, if he plays, I think Njoku can classify as a cash play. It's a really good matchup, but I love him for tournaments. So that's kind of it for that. I mean, if you want to put the Chiefs defense at 3,700, go for it, but I'm just not interested in it. Obviously, the upside with playing against Jameis is always there. Miami, Houston, not really interested in Stroud for cash at all. I don't want to get exposure to either one of these teams too much, just because at first I was really loving the pass attack for this game, and it still could be that, right? I just think this one's going to be a closer one to where Miami needs to win a lot of these games to stay in that playoff hunt. Houston hanging on to that first place spot. But it could easily be taken away. I kind of like the running back of Joe Mixon in tournaments. HN, still tournament play, but I don't think it's the greatest matchup. Houston's played running backs really well. I like Nico Collins in tournaments. I like Tyreek Hill in tournaments. I don't think either one is necessary for cash this week, but if you want to play them, go for it, right? So, not saying when doing this that you can't play anybody in tournaments and cash. Obviously, you can. You're going to have to get different when building your lineup. So, maybe your salary doesn't allow it and you play, right? You're going to have to play tournament plays, like quote unquote tournament plays. You're going to have to play guys that are going to be lower owned, and that's how you get over the ownership. Now, I don't think it's a heavy owned slate this week. I don't think there's any, besides running backs, I don't think there's any true like wide receiver, tight end, quarterbacks that really stand out as like, hey, these are the quarterbacks. Like there's a lot of similar plays depending on price points this week to where none of these guys are should be very highly owned. So tight ends, I think both tight ends are playable this week. Juanu Smith and Dalton Schultz are both tournament plays for me for their respected prices. Obviously, Dalton Schultz at 3,300, so very cheap. But Juanu Smith, I mean, even when he gets 4 targets, 3 for 44, gets a touchdown. So not the greatest at 5,300 getting 13, but I mean, he's just being used, and now Odell Beckham is gone. So that's kind of it for Miami. Houston. Now, the Jets, Jacksonville, this is where we start to get a little different, right? I love Aaron Rodgers this week at 5,400. We're watching the status of Breece Hall. He got a full participant in the Friday practice, so we're watching it. They still said that Breece Hall is questionable, even though he got was a full participant. So watch that injury news. But I love Aaron Rodgers. If Breece Hall's in, I think it's a good matchup for Breece Hall. I think the game script is very good for him. Gets a lot of volume. If he's out, Braylon Allen and Davis both playable. If you want to take that shot, obviously I wouldn't take either one in cash, just because Isaiah Davis got 10 for 40, got a touchdown, got some receiving work. and I think outscored Braylon Allen, right? Yeah, so I don't think either one is there in cash. Then we get to the wide receivers. I love Devontae Adams on this one at 6,900. I think he's a great cash play if you want to pay up for him. Obviously, there's another wide receiver, which we'll talk about soon, for $100 cheaper that it makes sense to go there. But I think Allen Lazard kind of stands out at his price point of 4,300. Brian Thomas, I think, is just as good of a cash play. Although I don't know if I want to get there this week with Mac Jones against the Jets. But, I mean, Brian Thomas the last 2 weeks, 10 plus targets, has paid off for his price point. It kind of stays at the same price against the Jets, who I can't remember if it's Reed that's going to be out for the Jets, but its starting corner is going to be out for the Jets. It's not Sauce. Sauce is going to be back, but I'd like to say it's Reed, but I'm not 100%. Tight end, Brenton Strange is now playable. He is playable against a Jets defense that at times has given up points to tight ends. But first price point, 2,500. We saw him earlier in the season when Evan Engram went down. Him pay off quite a bit for his price point, right? 9.5, 9.2, goes up to 3,200, still gets 12.4. So I definitely think Brenton Strange is a cash play at tight end this week if you want to pay down there, right? You don't need a lot. If you get 7, 8, 9 points at 2,500p, pays off, right? That's what you want out of that, so you can pay up at other good plays and get those plays. So for the Jets, Jacksonville, that's kind of where I'm at with that game. Now, moving on to Baltimore and New York. If you want to go Lamar, you can go Lamar. I don't think you need to, though. Obviously, Lamar's going to get his points. It's a good matchup for him. But I'm looking at Derrick Henry at 8,300 just being a massive piece of this game. If you want to get a little bit different and get some points out of it, Justice Hill gets a lot of snaps. Now, the volume might not be there, but Justice Hill is on the field quite a bit. So you look at some of the points he's putting up this season, and I think he's a good tournament play at his price point of 4,800. If you want to get exposure to the Baltimore running game and fade Derrick Henry, right? It's not saying Derrick Henry won't have a good game. Like, he could have, 18 points, 19 points, and it's a good game by NFL standards of stats, but for fantasy, it might not be the great, or DFS, it might not be the greatest for his price point at 8,300. So, getting some exposure in Justice Hill in tournaments, with how bad the Giants defense has been all season against the run, and now they're dealing with some injuries in their 7, right? The linebackers and linemen dealing with 2 starting injuries right now, defensive tackle and linebacker. So, I love Derrick Henry this week. The wide receivers are playable, right? I think Malik Neighbors is in a good spot. He's at a really good price point. His numbers versus man are very good. So I think for tournaments, he's easily playable. Obviously, with the quarterback play right now, it's not the greatest. But I mean, he's seen 10 plus targets a lot this season. They're wanting to get Malik Neighbors involved, but with the quarterback play, the ceiling is kind of lowered. Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, definitely playable. Giants dealing with some secondary issues as well. I think the Baltimore, with how heavy favorites they are, they could get it right. Like, Zay Flowers can have a good game with Baltimore doing what they should do according to Vegas, right? Like, this is, I think, the biggest spread we've seen this year at 16.5. It's got to be. But there's a very, very good possibility that Lamar, Zay Flowers, Rashard Bateman, those guys have good games, and Baltimore still runs a game, right? There's a good possibility that Baltimore comes out to a big lead. They're passing the ball. They have success. Zay Flower has, let's say, 4 receptions for 70 yards and a touchdown, and he has a good game, right? It's a good game. It's the same thing for Bateman. Like, that could happen, right? We've seen it in the past where a team gets a big lead through passing, they run the ball, and the running game has success as well. So I think those guys are playable. None in cash, but definitely in tournaments. And then I liked Daniel Bellinger until Drew Lock was out. I think with Drew Lock, the tight end play was better for the Giants. But now with DeVito, I don't think it's there as much. And there's 2 other tight ends with good matchups. One we talked about in Strange. Another one we'll talk about shortly here in this one. And then, yeah, Baltimore's defense at 3,900, I think is easily playable this week if you can afford it. And you do something like that by punting at tight end. So now moving on to the Bengals and Titans game. Obviously, Joe Burrow's always playable. His price can continue to go up, and he's going to continue to be playable. Like, his floor has been crazy this season. 13 has been his floor, and that was against Philly. But you see in the last 5 games, and he's putting up 20-plus points every game. And some of these against some good defenses, right? Pittsburgh's defense has been a good defense. The Chargers' defense has been a good defense. Obviously, Dallas, Baltimore, Vegas haven't been, but he's had good games against everybody. I like the run game for this, though. Will Levis on the other side is playable at 5K. Obviously, I don't think either one of these are cashes either. This game could be ugly. It could be a run game, right? We're seeing a head coach facing his former team in Tennessee and Callahan, so Tony Pollard, Chase Brown, both those guys playable. In tournaments, I don't think you need to go either one in cash, but I will say Chase Brown continues to get a heavy amount of volume, which is why he is paying off. But now he is 7,200, so he is getting up there in price. You're not getting kind of just a free play of volume. So wide receiver Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, though, are cash plays as well as Calvin Ridley. I think all 3 of these guys should be in your cash pool. Not saying you have to play them. I'm not saying that. But when you're making your cash lineups and you're looking at wide receivers, obviously Jamar Chase is killing it. I don't think you need to go to Jamar Chase, but he has been a safety blanket for Joe Burrow in these tighter games, which this one could be, right? With how bad Cincinnati's defense is, a play caller facing his former team that knows their secrets and knows all this stuff. So we could see that. But T. Higgins and Calvin Ridley for their price points, I think, are both really heavy cash plays you should consider this week. Their numbers versus man, Ridley versus man more, right? Cincinnati runs just a little bit more man than zone. And Ridley's numbers really stand out. Plus, I mean, he is just the only guy, really. Nick Westbrook-Akine is a touchdown guy, but as far as a guy that's going to get yards, Calvin Ridley is playable. Now, tight ends. I think Chig is a really good tournament play. Obviously, he has not really paid off at all this season. They just don't get him the ball. I said it last week. They need to get him the ball. If this offense wants to get just that much better, they need to find ways to get their tight end the ball, which he's had some success, right? It's not saying he's a superstar tight end, but for a team that is struggling offensively and a team that wants to run the ball a lot, you would think the tight end in play action would be a lot more used, and he's not. Like, he's not getting targets. Like, someone like Chig in that offense should see 6 to 7 targets every game. And I don't like it. I'm not saying Chig is a special talent. I'm not. But for a team that runs the offense they should run more play action and have the ball to tight end more. It's just how that offense should succeed way more than they have, right? It's clear they want to run the ball. They want to use Tony Pollard. Tajay Spears has been banged up, so they haven't had that 1-2 punch. But they have not used Chig in the way they should have with how struggling that offense has been. I thought he would have been used more this season, but he is not. So I think Chig is playable in tournaments. There is that upside against a defense that is very bad against tight ends. Now moving on to the New England and Arizona. I see a lot of people wanting to get to Kyler this week in cash. And Kyler just, the way they run their team, right, is depending on their defense, using their defense to kind of win them games, use James Conner. Kyler has just not been the same Kyler we're kind of used to. We've seen some of the games, right? 28 points against the Jets, 25 against Miami, 25 against San Fran, 28 against the Rams. We've seen those games, but we're also seeing these games where he's getting, just over 10 points, somewhere around 15 points. Like, it's been a common theme for Kyler, so it is risky this week against New England. Obviously, their defense has been very underperforming. Could see some injuries defensively, so that's one to watch for. But New England's defense has been bad against quarterbacks. I'd just rather target someone like James Conner to get that piece of the offense, or go Trey McBride. So, Conner's in a really good spot. I don't trust either Stevenson or Gibson in cash, but I do think they're tournament plays. So if you want to get there in tournament, I don't have a problem with that. I would target Stevenson over Gibson in tournament, but I do think it's playable. And then Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, his price could it's tough, right? I was down on Marvin Harrison this season. I like him going forward though, but I was down on Marvin Harrison this season. He just a lot of tough matchups for the passing game of Arizona. But even then, he's not getting as much targets as I'd like him to get. It's one thing for the receptions, but the targets has not been where I thought they've been. I mean, he's only gotten over 100 yards twice this season. 7 touchdowns, which has helped out his fantasy numbers, but he's put out a lot of duds this season. But his price continues to drop, so it is playable for his price point. And then, I mentioned Trey McBride is a huge cash play for me. He's just kind of been the guy to get all the targets, right? Like, the targets has been crazy for Trey McBride. We saw it last year, and now seeing it again towards the end of the year. Moving on, Indy and Denver. I think both quarterbacks are tournament plays. I don't think you need to go there in cash, but I do like the upside, right? I do like this being a very meaningful game for both teams. Both must-win games for both teams. Kind of saw Denver's defense been getting beat lately, especially against someone like Jameis Winston. So I like both quarterbacks. Yet again, I don't think you need to go there in cash, but I do like the upside potential for this game if we see the better version of these offenses. The running back's not interested in Jonathan Taylor. I am interested in the Denver side of Williams, McLaughlin, Estime, more McLaughlin and Williams for their price points against a defense that gives up a lot of rushing to opposing teams. So I like them in tournaments. Yet again, no cash. And then Cortland Sutton at 6,600 is just a safety piece if you want to continue to put him in your lineup. Go for it. He is getting up there in price, right? He's above 6K. We saw him in the last game against Cleveland. He's now 6,600, so he's getting up there in price. So you have to be aware when you're paying that price for him to get somewhere around 14 to 16 points. It's not paying off like it did when he was like 5,900. So that's something to be aware of. But Josh Downs, if he is playing, he will get targets. He will be on the field. He's going to be 5,100. So that is one to definitely watch for this week as well. So I like that piece. Not really interested in tight ends. Obviously, neither team has a starting tight end. So and then not really interested in defenses. Now moving on to one of the better games of the slate, we get Buffalo and Detroit. We just saw Buffalo just get lit up by Matt Stafford in that offense, and now they get Jared Goff in Detroit's offense. Now, this is a weird thing. I think Josh Allen is a good cash play this week. I think he's a really good cash play against Detroit. Obviously, he's been just a monster for not only fantasy but NFL, right? Considered for the MVP, kind of the front runner right now after the game he just had. I don't think you need to stack him with anybody though. That is the thing, right? I think you could solo Josh Allen. He gets you 30 points against Detroit, right? Detroit's played the run really good. They're really, 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 really banged up defensively. The amount of pieces that are on the IR just injured week to week from Detroit's defense is crazy. So I like Josh Allen there. On the same side, Jared Goff against Buffalo is playable as well. If one of these offenses break out, the other offense is going to be throwing more. But Detroit's going to do what they've done against teams. They're going to use Jahmyr Gibbs. They're going to use David Montgomery. They're going to try to control the game and make it very, very difficult for opposing offenses to get a flow going. So I don't think Jahmyr Gibbs or David Montgomery is a good cash play. They're just getting up there in price. The volume is so split. I don't think you need to go either one. And then James Cook, just a tough matchup. For wide receiver, I'm either looking at Amon-Ra at 7,600 at home against Buffalo. In the slot, obviously Douglas is out, but that's not who Amon-Ra would be playing. Would be playing Johnson. But it's a good matchup for him. Just don't know if the passing is going to get there, but I do think he's very, very playable at 7,600. And then kind of looking at Amari Cooper at 5,300. It's a good matchup for Shakir, but his numbers versus man are not as good as they are versus zone. If it was a zone matchup against Detroit, it would be an amazing matchup for Shakir. I still think he's playable in tournaments. It's a good one-on-one opportunity for him, but he just doesn't get the ball as much versus man as much as like Amari Cooper and Keon Coleman do. So I think those guys are more playable. Tight end, Dalton Kincaid is going to be back, it looks like. I just don't have interest in him. And then Laporta is just like he's been getting more volume. He's been getting 6 targets a game pretty much, and he's been paying off. But he's not getting that ceiling game of a 20-plus point game, which is what you're really hoping for out of that one. So, and then my favorite one right now is Tampa and the Chargers. Justin Herbert got a full participant. Looking at Ladd McConkey's status, I think Justin Herbert's a really, really good cash play this week against a defense that gives up a lot of passing yards, gives up a lot of yards to wide receivers. And Justin Herbert kind of struggled from where we once were to where he was putting up a lot more consistently games. But his last 2 games, I mean, kind of struggled. And those are against Atlanta was a really good matchup, right? He burnt everybody that played him in cash, and a lot of people, including myself, played him. And then he came back against Kansas City, unfortunately lose in prime time. I mean, still throws a 70% completion percentage, 200 yards, a touchdown. But Ladd McConkey wasn't there. Will Dissly got hurt, so a lot of kind of moving pieces there, and he got banged up himself. Running back, if Bucky is out, if Bucky is out, Rashard White, I think, is a really good cash play against the Chargers. Just going to get a lot of volume, going to get receiving work. So at his price point, I think he's a really good cash play. Bucky's in, not really interested in either or. Wide receiver, Mike Evans, I think, is playable. I don't think it's a greatest thing. But Ladd McConkey would be a really good piece to put in your cash lineup if he's in. I think if he's out, Quentin Johnston is in a really good spot for me for the Chargers at 5K. So that's kind of the route I'm going if Ladd is in or out. And then tight end, yeah, we get Stone Smart, who's almost the Stoneman, right? Last week when Will Dissly goes out against a good matchup, right? Kansas City, a bottom 5 defense against tight ends. Gets 8.4 in the work he did get. Now gets another good matchup against a defense that is bottom 5, I believe, against tight ends. So that's kind of the plays there for me as well. And then last but not least, Pittsburgh and Philly. Not really interested in a lot of pieces in this game at all. Not really interested in Hurts or Russ. Not really interested in Saquon or Najee or Jalen Warren. Kind of the only person I'm interested in this game at all is A.J. Brown. His numbers versus man are amazing. Obviously, the issues with A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts just happened. So I kind of like the narrative of him having a good bounce-back game against Pittsburgh. It's a really good matchup. He's one of the best receivers in numbers versus man coverage, which Pittsburgh runs more man than zone. So at 8K, not a cash play, but a very good tournament play for me. So if you want to go and find a value piece out of this game, Calvin Austin at 3,600 I think is playable, but it is tough against the Philly secondary and no George Pickens. So that is it for this week. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. If you guys are interested in getting all my player pools, my cash tournament value, my bets and props, any of that is available on our website to subscribers. So check that out if you guys are interested. A very cheap subscription package. It's nothing crazy. So if you guys are interested in getting that or a FanDuel side, check that out on the website. I'll see you guys in the next one.